much a pedestrian-driven development. And so I don't think the applicants are against sidewalks by any means. And, if something were to happen to the tree in the future, or there was another way to tie into a sidewalk being built along Old Shell, I think they're open to those types of things. This is mainly being done in an attempt to appease the neighbors and save the tree.
Yeah, I think we're all on board with saving the tree, but it seems like there may be an opportunity to move the design if it doesn't, have a sharper turn there at the curb cut on the eastern side, and be closer to Old Shell. There's a lot of sidewalks on Old Shell that are within a foot to 2 feet from the actual road. Whether that's good or not, that's kind of a
pedestrians, even without the sidewalks that are still, the pedestrians aren't going to go away whether you have the sidewalk or not. So you make it better when you have the sidewalk.
Yeah, I think
I agree with that.
Yeah,
There's going to be a lot of development in this area that people in that vicinity are going to want to walk to.
yes.
One comment is that I did a quick measurement. There's no sidewalk on that side of Old Shell for 235 foot. And, in essence of, we're looking at this. I live around the corner. The tree is the concern. We'd love to keep the tree. That's why we did this development in Midtown. That's part of the charm. We look at this sidewalk as a challenge, and we're talking about 10 or 15 feet maximum. Maybe as little as 6, and that's the challenge here. I hate to damage a tree to build a sidewalk to nowhere.
So
I think the sidewalks will be filled in. I think it's a big priority with citizens to have sidewalks, and counselors have been using their CIP funds to build where they don't exist. It's just a matter of we can't do it overnight. So
Yeah.
I think that's the whole idea, is to get that sidewalk connectivity in place.
I agree with that. Let me real quick, but what we're talking about here is if we do something funky on that western side for 5 feet, just that may be a problem that has to get demoed later when actually the city does come, because these individual houses aren't going to pay for their own sidewalks in front of their houses. There is a chance we create a problem on that western side for no real reason at this point. Because it is a sidewalk to nowhere. Could see stopping it there and not wanting to do something that's going to conflict with a bigger engineered design and install of sidewalks on that western border in the future.
I think wherever
so
there's
I was just-
sidewalks,
I was
the
just
city
looking
would
at
do
the,
what they can to keep those that are in place and make it work. And hearing from our urban forester about a way to save the tree, I think that's a very important, and still get the pedestrian access safer than having people, walk up near the curb. So
I have a question for Mr.
kind of
Latta.
leaning in that direction.
I also think if we had, and we've talked about this at the commission, for several years now, this is the type of issue that if we had a sidewalk bank, so that when the city was ready to come in and do all of this, but unfortunately we don't have that opportunity.
I think most of the time when we have sidewalk waiver requests presented, it's because for economic reasons. I don't think this is an economic reason just for 10 or 15 feet. I think there is a real concern about the tree, and we've got the plan here that our urban forester has recommended that will be okay with the tree. The only concern is this plan, this revised plan, going to interfere with utilities in that little eastern island there and not give them the space they need for that? I don't think we have an answer to that unless Mr. Latta can give us more information on that.
Yeah, as that orange path is laid out, I know for a fact that there are some interferences with our utility. Whether we could work around it, I'd have to do a little work on that. One thing, if we were to continue along our current alignment and basically bring the sidewalk perpendicular to Old Shell, basically along on that eastern island, and then make a 90-degree turn to do it. It is possible from a pedestrian driver interaction standpoint. It's not the best situation, just because drivers are typically expect pedestrians to travel in straight lines along their current path. So turns, that's the only concern I have with that, is just a safety thing and protecting those pedestrians. Because it
William,
is a busy, go ahead.
William, what's the setback here
Setback from,
from the right of way? Existing right of way.
so that dashed line that comes along the front of the parking spaces out front, that's the right of way line.
So the rest of the sidewalk and the parking is on y'all's property?
That's correct.
I mean, is there any ability, or would the city allow you just to cut, instead of going towards Old Shell, cut straight across and go between those existing oak trees, in hopes that if the city ever connected it, they could get some sort of access to that lot to connect and make it
Yeah,
safer?
the geometry doesn't really seem to work out if you do it that way. You'd have to make a really, really sharp turn back around the tree to connect back to the sidewalk on the other side.
There
And
is no
you would-
sidewalk on the other side, and the room, there's no space to put it anywhere.
Yeah, so I think what you're trying to say is,
What I'm saying is if you go between the trees, you know, there's not enough room. I mean, you'd essentially be in that dude's back door by the time you got it down, you know, back where you could turn it down back to the
Well,
street.
if I understand you, Taylor, you're talking about, you know, if in the future the city were to put in sidewalks, and then they could possibly negotiate with that property owner for an easement or whatever to connect the sidewalks.
I mean,
in
I
that
understand
manner.
from a developer that builds a sidewalk that close to a busy road with those sharp turns, I mean, there's probably some liability there.
Well, I know that the urban forestry was just out there today, and this is, everybody's kind of looking at this for the first time. You know, would you be open to us holding over the sidewalk waiver so that y'all could go back and look at it more carefully and see if there's other, taking in all of the commissioners' comments today and see what you might be able to accommodate?
Yeah, we're open to that.
I think that's a good plan because I don't really feel comfortable granting the waiver request without knowing if there's a way to get that sidewalk in there with what urban forestry is recommending with that, you know, location of the sidewalk. As far as being, you know, close to Old Shell Road, that is a concern, but again, people are going to be walking through there with concrete on the ground or not. So the concrete does make it safer. So we need to try to find a way to get the sidewalk in there.
So,
And I just,
go ahead, Matt.
so Jennifer, yeah. So the way it looks to me, we're not really getting the pedestrians any closer to the street than they already would have ended up if the section, you know, if it, as it exists on the site plan in our packet. You know, it's just, instead we're making it a little bit curvier to avoid the tree. You know, I think that there has to be some kind of way to walk across the utilities unless they're enormous. I mean, I don't know what those would look like, but I would be for holding it over. Frankly, I'm not against the waiver altogether if it was ending right there on the driveway. If we could, I don't know how to do this, but if there was some way to align it so that in the future, if the city were to come in and put in a sidewalk, because this seems like a very good candidate for our sidewalk program. I mean, as they said earlier, it's, you know, a couple 100 feet away from the sidewalk on the other side of Shell Road Place. So, I mean, to me, as long as it was configured in such a way that it's easy to connect later, whether it's on one side of the driveway or the other is not going to be very relevant to us. And the easiest way to avoid hurting the tree is to do nothing next to the tree. So I'm open to anything, and holding over is probably the best way to figure out all the details.
Yeah,
So my
well,
question, Mrs. Pappas, would be, what's the time frame? The next meeting is in 2 weeks. Would that be enough time for y'all, Mr. Latta, Mr. Howell, to address these issues, or do you want us to hold it over a month?
I think 2 weeks would be enough time.
I would recommend though that by close of business Friday, we would need an updated site plan to show any utilities that are proposed in this island that may impact where a sidewalk can be located.
We'll give you that. We'll also have our surveyor stake where we've already put them in. We've already made the taps and the water meters are already there. The fire vault's already there underground. What I'd like to also have is over the course of this 2 weeks, or hopefully by Friday, I'd like to have something from the Alabama Power Engineer showing where they propose their support pole to go, because there's going to be an additional pole in that island of what's shown right now.
Okay, well then I will make the motion to hold over this item until the next meeting, which is February 18th, with this Friday being the deadline for utility information and other data that needs to be provided to the commission.
Correct.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
If I may, real quick, I just want to make sure for the record, we had William Latta with Clark Gear Latham. We had Mr. Stephen Howe, you're with Crescent Construction
Crescent Development.
Development. Thank you, sir. And then Lewis Golden.
Hamilton and Company.
Okay, just wanting to confirm the role. All right, thank
I
y'all.
apologize for not asking for that information.
That's okay, that's
And I
okay.
will Pass
I'm
the
gonna-
devil back to Liva, Mrs. Latham.
Yeah, and I'm gonna move these gentlemen to the waiting room and bring in Mr. Bird. I really hope he's, yay, Jerry, you here? It says he's here. Mr. Bird?
I think we're gonna have to move on without him.
Should we just try to call him on the phone?
Bird, do you mind?
All we
Let me
need is
call.
for him to say he's in agreement with the recommendations.
When I talked to him yesterday, he was, but since he was attending, hold on.
Maybe he could mail you an email message with that confirmation.
Put my email down or else it's popping up on y'all all during my meeting,
Okay,
your meeting.
just
Well,
trying to think of a way to get the confirmation.
He's on speakerphone.
I'm going to go ahead and call number 2 because that's what we're trying to cover. It's 2508 Riverside Drive, Mosteller Park subdivision.
Have we had any communication from Mr. Bird, or is he just totally off the reservation, or what?
Yes, his daughter just hollered at him to go to the meeting, and
He sent us a chat, said he may try to call in, or is that, no, that was from Bert.
yes, and I've already let him in. He's just, and I've just let in Mr. Amberger.
I love that we're using technology that can connect people.
I have
all over
Mr. Bird on the phone,
Video,
so hold on. Hold on, let me hold him up.
but,
You're
but
gonna
we're
say what
relying
you
on
want.
his daughter
Here we
to
go.
holler at him.
Yeah.
Is that him?
They say you can't, hold on, let me try again. Speak loudly. Well, now the camera just fell off. So, Jerry says he has no issues.
With
On
both?
Number 2 and 3.
Both applications, is that correct? Okay, that is correct.
Ms.
Okay,
Ms.
great.
Mathis, are you okay with us proceeding to discuss those?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, on number 2, the staff has recommended a waiver of VD1, subject to certain conditions and a tentative approval. Do any of the commissioners have anything they want to say about this application?
I would
Since
make
the
the motion.
applicant is, since the applicant is agreeable, I move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? There, that motion passes. We're going to now move on to number 3, 4040 Audubon Drive East, RNG Place subdivision. It has been recommended for tentative approval. The applicant has indicated agreement with the recommendations. Do any of the commissioners have any questions or comments?
Motion
I
to
would move that we approve subject to staff recommendations waiving section PD3.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion or any discussion at all? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Ms. Pappas, do we have any further business?
No, ma'am, and thank you all for sticking. with us.
Margaret, before we go, actually, I do have something. In speaking with Shayla late last week, I'm sure that everybody's been reviewing the UDC. I wanted to point out there's a packet that came with the draft with it says, "I heard your feedback" on the front. I really urge everybody to take a look at that. It has a lot of the gripes and grievances that I'm sure we've all heard, but it has some very thoughtful feedback from the staff, and it kind of breaks down the changes that the staff have made based on that feedback, or in a lot of cases illustrates where our really squeaky wheels just didn't read the document. And it was very, very useful for me reading it. It helped direct me to the pieces of the document that are probably going to be more contentious when we have to hear about it on the 25th. And I just really wanted to stress that it's a very well put together document. It's a lot easier to read than reading all 10,000 pages of the UDC, and it's very, very useful. So that's all I had to say.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Does anybody else have anything else they need to say? Well, then this.
Quick question to staff on that front. On the 25th, when we're reviewing that document in an open forum, what are we tasked with doing? I mean, are we looking at suggesting changes to the staff? You know, we did this before with the map and mobile, and they kind of just seem to want a rubber stamp. What are we to expect on that date?
You will have a public hearing and you will have a plethora of concerned citizens that you will hear from. And that for that day is fulfilling your legal obligation with that public hearing.
Yeah, this is Doug. Yeah, there's no vote that day. You just take notes on what the public tells you their concerns are. Any technical questions can be answered by the staff, and we just let the public speak their mind and then regather in a few weeks to discuss it.
And then in those few weeks, are we kind of negotiating like we would with an applicant on things here and there? I mean, I guess I'm just trying to get a feel for how it's going to go.
The Planning Commission can approve a document as a motion's made. So if somebody makes a motion to approve the document minus this section or with these tweaks, that's doable.
Okay.
But, certainly after the public hearing, whenever we do gather to discuss it, any issues, any questions by any of y'all, that's the forum for it.
And then it goes to the city council, correct?
Yes, and they will have a public hearing and hopefully vote on it.
Okay. Thank you, Doug.
I would just remind for the general public that may be viewing the meeting today, that the deadline to register to speak, as well as to provide us with any comments through the portal is February the 19th at noon. And that's important for us to keep communicating that. Through the last several iterations, I'll get hand-delivered email, snail mail, all kinds of things well after the deadline. And so it's very important that we communicate to the public that February 19th at noon is the deadline.
Shayla, excuse me, is that in that flyer already, that people are aware of that deadline?
Yes, as well as all of our legal advertisements.
Okay, good. Okay. And I'll promote that in my newsletter.
Okay. Anybody else have anything else? This meeting is adjourned.
Happy Mardi Gras. everybody.